everyone, and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. Well, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, that you know that we haven't been overly kind to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish this season, or any season, if I'm being honest. So, with the new year, we have the new chaps, and we have decided to spoil our friends in South Bend. But before that, I am joined by my co-host, who has done as much for college football as Frank Sinatra did for crooning. Oliver, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. It was that was a great introduction. I enjoyed that. Get better. I was going to say getting better every week, but they're always great.
I'm getting practice, and I think I'd a better one if Alex had turned up, but that's for another week. I can save that. Our guest is a college football writing heavyweight. We are privileged that he makes his third appearance on this podcast, and on this occasion to talk about his book, American Coach: The Triumph and Tragedy of Notre Dame legend Frank Leahy. So it truly is a thrill to welcome back Ivan Maisel. Ivan, welcome. How are you?
I am great, George. I am thrilled to see y'all again.
We get feedback on all our episodes, but we definitely get feedback when you come on the podcast. We know that we've managed to hit the right note when you're on. Now we're here to talk about the book. We'll touch a little bit on the general college football scene at the end if we've got time. But I wanted to ask not so much about the concept, but how did you get interested in writing a book about Frank Leahy? It clearly is a remarkable story, but what piques your interest to such a point that you think, do you know what? I'm going to write a book about this.
George, it's funny. It was a name that we all know and we kind of all take for granted. And I certainly did. And it dawned on me, I think when we were working on the 150 project for ESPN, uh, that I really didn't know a lot about him. And then I kind of looked around and figured out that nobody's written about him. He died in 1973 and he just kind of disappeared. And in fact, I typed his name into Amazon just to see what books had been written about him since he died, and there really wasn't. There was no biography of him. There had been a sort of a posthumous autobiography by Wells Twombly, who was a great San Francisco uh, columnist, but no biography. So I thought, well, and there were just threads I started to pull on like that. That and just again took him for granted, but I started thinking about his record and the fact that guys who had coached 10 years or more, he still ranks second in winning percentage only to Rockne, who he played for. And yet it took him 13 attempts to be elected to the College Football Hall of Fame, which really intrigued me. And so I just kind of started doing some research.
Perhaps most, well, I say perhaps isn't the right word. Um, Most famous for his time at Notre Dame, obviously, but I'm a big Boston College fan, so I was very excited for this conversation to come up. Lee was the head coach of Boston College before his time with the Irish, and largely overshadowed because of that success that he had in South Bend. But he was also incredibly successful at Chestnut Hill as well. Talk to me a little bit about his time there, if you would, Ivan.
Well, he gets the job at BC. He's 30 years old, and he's only 10 years out of well, he's not even 10 years. He's 9 years out of college, and he uh, I mean, we think of BC as one of the best academic institutions on the East Coast now. And back then it consisted of four buildings, none of them dorms. It was a college, a commuter school for the sons of immigrants who were not going to be accepted at Harvard or any other school because of their religion, any of the other old line colleges in the Northeast. So it was just little old BC, and they had a decent football team, but nothing great. And he takes them and goes 9-2 and 11-0, capping off the second season, 1940, with a upset of Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl, a team that at the time Colonel Nealon and then later General Nealon would describe as his best team ever. And BC beat them. And so all of a sudden he was this big uh, personage in the sport. And right about that time, Notre Dame's coach resigned. And so there you have it.
When we talk about Notre Dame, I would try to be a little bit humorous at the start of it, but Notre Dame conjures up. I think, well, certainly there's kind of two camps. If I want to be really stereotypical about it, there's those who absolutely adore the school and the football, and I kind of akin it to maybe Manchester United in this country, where 99% of Manchester United fans have probably never been inside Old Trafford, kind of idea, so but it also conjures up, as we've seen through the college football playoffs, sometimes a slightly negative connotation because of their legacy. But certainly for us, for Oliver and I, who didn't grow up in the States in the last century, but also for a lot of people who will be listening to this podcast, we can't appreciate what it was like growing up in the second half of the 20th century with the likes of Notre Dame. Because when I talk to people, some people, there's a kind of glaze in their eyes about that. Um, I was almost going to compare them to the college football equivalent to New York Yankees, but when I read an extract from the book, you talk a little bit about the part that Notre Dame played in sports coming post World War II, right? So how
Yes.
sports kind of advanced. What For those who are listening, tell us about what part Notre Dame played in that kind of rise from the ashes, if you want to compare it like that.
Well, George, that part really intrigued me again as I started to dig into it. And after the war, the American populace, even though they hadn't been certainly as close to the front lines as the UK or Western Europe, uh, people were tired of sacrifice and they wanted to get back to normalcy, whatever normalcy was, and that meant movies, that meant sporting events, and at that time there were only two major team sports in American culture, which was Major League Baseball and college football. The NFL was still looked at as being a little seedy, a little, people deigned to look at it. And the NBA was literally just beginning. It did, I think it began in 1946. So within the realm of baseball and college football, there were really only two national teams, and that was, as you alluded to, the Yankees and Notre Dame. And Notre Dame played Army in the 1946 much ballyhooed 0-0 game, and it was the biggest sporting event in the country since before the war, and was described that way before the game, much less after nobody scored. So sports in Notre Dame played a huge role in culture right then after the war.
And I guess that goes a long way to explaining the kind of legacy following that Notre Dame has in the country, where clearly generations of people, again, you're joking that people bandwagon, but actually if you were watching, your grandfather or your father was watching sports back then you're more inclined to watch. So that makes a lot of sense. I hadn't quite appreciated the legacy that Notre Dame had in the country. That's really interesting.
Well, there were a couple of things going on there, and one was uh, Notre Dame's role as sort of this Catholic beacon. This was still, even in the post-war era, there was a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment in this country, and Notre Dame was this proof out there that uh, a Catholic entity could be as good, could be as American, could be as successful in America as as any other, and that was really important to people back then, and just the sense of Notre Dame being a national team. I mean, even now, college football is somewhat of a regional sport, a lot less so than it used to be now that everybody's on television every week. But back then, Notre Dame was the only team that was on the radio across the country every week. And there would be 6, 10 for big games, as many as 10 radio crews describing the game. And people weren't neutral about Notre Dame then. You know, they either loved them or hated them.
Mm.
There's a lot of that still now. Even
Yeah.
even on this podcast, hey George. Coach was very young when he took over. George referenced, and he referenced he was a young man when he started at Boston College. He was very young when he took over at Notre Dame, and following in the footsteps of a legendary coach at that program and a massive program too. It's kind of hard not to draw parallels with what's happening right now. Obviously, Kalen DeBoer isn't as young as Coach was when he took over at Notre Dame, but Kalen DeBoer follows in the footsteps of a legendary coach. Coach Leahy really did try and do it his own way, very different. And I think Kalen DeBoer a little bit of that now as he takes over from Nick Saban. How did Coach win over his critics and ultimately change the identity of the Fighting Irish?
Well, he did it very strategically, Oliver. You know, he wanted to, you know, the hold that Rockne had on Notre Dame 10 years after his death was still pretty strong. And Notre Dame was still using Rockne's offense 10 years later. And meanwhile, the T formation had become a big deal. Stanford used it in 1940 to go from one win in 1939 to being 11-0 and winning the Rose Bowl in 1940. And the Chicago Bears in the NFL were using the T formation, and Notre Dame is within driving distance of Soldier Field where the Bears played. And Leahy was really enamored with the offense. So he didn't do it his first year. His first year, he used the Rockne system, but he very kind of slowly got everybody on campus, meaning the administration, meaning the priests, used to the idea that he was going to deviate from what Rockne did. And then he introduced it. And it did, you know, the first year was rocky, and it really rattled Leahy, and the stress of going through that criticism as Notre Dame lost 2 games and tied 2 others was such that he ended up in the hospital for almost 3 weeks, which was a little flashing light of what was to come in his life, the stress and how it ate at him. But the other point I would make is, and it's and both to what you asked and what George asked me, is that Leahy to me was the guy who made Notre Dame Notre Dame, and so that the success was ascribed to the program rather than to the man, because Rockne had that incredible success and had put Notre Dame on the map, but the 2 coaches who followed Rockne did not have that success, and there was 10 years had gone by. It's a long time to not be successful, and to me, Leahy's ability to put Notre Dame back at the top transferred that stamp of success just from Rockne to the university as a whole, and I think that has sustained itself to this day.
You referenced the college football 150 programs that you were heavily involved in when ESPN did them, and that was a glorious series of episodes that you did, and I particularly like the kind of round the tables where you kind of compared different events. But
those were fun, yeah.
But that brings up that kind of age-old debate about, I think the term GOAT is much overused now, right? But it does how does Nick Saban compare with Bear Bryant, for example, or how does compare with, say, Marcus Freeman? It's a very poor analogy, and I guess where we kind of look at. We try to compare college football today versus college football, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And I don't know if you can answer this question, Ivan, but back then we had Notre Dame, a very dominant team in college football, in the same way as the Packers were a very dominant team in the NFL in the early days. Do you think in the way that college football has changed, much change from 50 years ago, that a college team can dominate in the same way as Notre Dame did back then? And I guess we've got a very live example just now about Indiana, because people just don't know what's going to happen with Indiana. Are they going to be a one-hit wonder, or are they going to be here for the next 10 years? But in general, do you think a team can dominate for a period of time in this changing face of college football?
It's interesting, George, and I'm I'm really reluctant to make sweeping statements now because the game is in the middle of such change as I don't know that I've seen since I began covering it. Nobody predicted when we went to the playoff system that the SEC in general and Alabama in particular would have its thumb on the scale the way that it did. The great programs, the great coaches find a way, and they figure out what the system is, and then they exploit it and to great success. And for all the changes that have happened through the history of the sport, there's always been somebody at the top of the hill. It was Notre Dame in the post-war era. It was Oklahoma in the 50s, USC in Alabama in the 60s, Nebraska and Oklahoma and Alabama in the 70s. I mean, and on and on and on. Miami, Notre Dame. So, you know, coaches are really good at figuring out how to work the system and then working it. Nobody saw Kurt Signetti coming. He's in his mid 60s. How long is he going to stay there? And, are we, I don't want to anoint him at least for another 2 weeks, but I mean, they clearly are the best team in the game right now, but they still got 2 games to win. But the money that has flowed into the game has been a great equalizer, and I don't
Mhm.
know that anybody saw that coming. And that's great fun to watch. The fact I keep wondering because I'm on the selection committee, and the semifinal teams are 1, 5, 6, and 10 seeds, and it's like, were we that far off, or is the talent that spread out? And I don't know what the answer is, and I kind of wait and see what happens.
I
And I
think the
guess
answer,
you. Sorry. I was just going to say. I guess 1, 5, 6, and 10. That's that. And if you're looking at statistics, that's a great spread. People should actually be joyful about that, because what it does is it shows you that. I wouldn't say there was an equalizer, but certainly that's what you want. If it was 1, 2, 3, 4, like it used to be in the good old bad old days, people would be bemoaning it was the same 4 teams that get to So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of idea. But to me, 1, 5, 6, and 10 is
Yeah.
actually a really good outcome. But anyway, sorry, Ollie, I just wanted to say that.
Uh, let me before Ali, before you get, let me just say, I've thought about, well, if it was just a 14 playoff and we had seen Indiana play Texas Tech and Oregon, and excuse me, and Ohio State play Georgia, we'd have been happy. It'd been 2 great games, and we would have thought, oh well, too bad Oregon. But the fact that we instead got 1, 5, 6, and 10, I've gone back and thought of all those teams that didn't get in for in the 14 playoff era and thought, wow, what did we miss there? So it's I don't know, it's interesting. I like your positive spin on it.
as an extension of that, before I get to what my actual question was, you talk about George's positive spin there. There is so much of the opposite spin where the college football selection committee is concerned, not just this year, but seemingly every year. When you're involved in that role, how easy is it to drown out that noise or allow it to consume you? I guess is probably the better way of framing that.
Well, as one of the guys who was making the noise, for almost 40 years, I'm kind of just, hey, okay, it's my turn. I got to take it now. I mean, I'm listening to all my buddies do their podcast and hearing the committee called stupid and I've actually gone so far as to write an email to one of them because I was so pissed off, but I just didn't send it. So and I'll see them all in Miami, and look, it's fair game. I mean, and that's the beauty of the sport. And I knew that when I chose to go on the committee. It was like, okay, target right here, and it's that's just part of it.
Writing an email and not sending it is the ultimate in cathartic experience, that's for sure. Um,
Yes.
let's expand on talk about the college football playoff because it is an all-consuming entity for quite a lot of college football fans now. We talked about the game being a regional affair, but also the greater exposure that it has nationally now, and the college football playoff is it feels like it dominates conversation from week 0 through to the very bitter end. Even when there's so much more to play for in between, that's kind of the epitome of the changing face of college football. Everyone just cares about the college football playoff. Everyone just cares about the money that tournament brings. What you covered the game for the amount of time that you stated? Then I'm not going to keep saying you've been covering it for decades because that's disrespectful. Um, what's your thoughts on the game as it is right now, Ivan?
Well, all the things that we were all so scared of, paying the players and oh, my light just went out. Paying the players and um, no red shirting and all the things that were so sacred in college football. We're doing that now, and the ratings are up. And the sport is as popular as it's ever been. Television ratings, they announced yesterday the Rose Bowl rating was, I think, almost 25 million people watched the Rose Bowl, which is a lot for a college football game, especially a quarterfinal. So, yeah, it's, now the other possibility is that the ratings could be up solely because of betting. Betting is now legal on college football. So, and y'all are used to that. That's still sort of a new toy in American sports is all the betting. So it's it's heartening, honestly, Oliver, just to see that people still love the game and the lure of the emotional pull that college football exerts on its fans, which is what I grew up with in Alabama and what has kept me tethered to the game all these years, that pull still exists. Those magnets still work. Uh, that's extremely heartening to see.
And for those new football fans, we'll go around full circle to how we started the podcast. For those new football fans who maybe don't have such a knowledge base of the legends of the game, of everything that came before what we have right now, what should fans, the new generation of fans, know about Coach Leahy?
Wow, that's a great question. What should they know about Frank Leahy? He viewed his entire life like this, what will help me win a football game? And that's why he won so much. It's also why his health uh, was bad. It was also why his marriage struggled. It was also why his kids didn't really know him. And those are all of those things are all these sort of American fables. I mean, he was a bootstrap guy, came from nothing and became an immense success and a national celebrity and at a great cost. And he was a terrific innovator. He was a terrific motivator, and uh, there's never, I mean, from 1946 through 1949, Notre Dame did not lose a game. It's just remarkable. he had, if you count Paul Hornung, who he recruited to Notre Dame but did not play for him because he left after Hornung's freshman year, and freshmen weren't eligible then. He had 5 Heisman Trophy winners. He had 4 national championships in only 11 seasons at Notre Dame. Those are all Saban-esque numbers, and I don't know that anybody has had that level of success for that extended period of time, from Leahy until Saban did it. So there is a parallel there. And the other parallel I would draw is to Urban Meyer, who also had great success and also health deteriorated because of the stress he imposed on himself to achieve that success. To me, there's also a lot of parallels between those two guys as well.
Yeah, and I think yeah, I wondered this year with the volume of head coaches being terminated in a contract and the pressure that puts on the head coaches. Now, that's not to say head coaches have never been under pressure, but head coaches getting fired after 3, 4, 5 games of a season just seems, just far too presumptive in terms of letting things play out. But money talks, right? And people looking for a resolution because they want to try and turn seasons around. But I do wonder about the impact that will have on head coaches, their health going forward. I think it has to have some sort of, impact, but,
I doubt it, George. I mean, all these guys, especially young guys, they're young and vital, and they're not thinking about that. And they never see it coming either. It's the Mike Tyson line. Everybody is tough until they get hit in the mouth. So once that stress hits you, then you don't know. How did I get into this mess? Well,
Yeah.
it's pretty obvious if you had wanted to see it. Yeah.
Yeah. And $12 million a season will help you as well. So
exactly.
The book is called American Coach: The Triumph and Tragedy of Notre Dame Legend Frank Leahy. Ivan, we've actually I think we've got as many listeners in the US as we have in the UK. So tell people where they can get the book. Is the book available on audio? Do they hear your dulcet tones talking about the book? Where can we grab a copy?
Well, thanks, George. It's I'm looking. Oh, it's right here. Hold on. I'm back. Right here. It's available wherever you buy books. If your bookstore doesn't have it, they can order it. It's available on Amazon. There is an audio book. I read the first chapter and I read the acknowledgments. That was about where my level of voice talent stopped, I thought. But it is available in audiobook and ebook, and it's doing well. It's been very gratifying to see the response and just to bring a guy back who was just right there in front of everybody and nobody saw him for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, what a fantastic topic. Well, listen, we've kept you so long that your light has gone out. That's always a telltale sign that the guest has had enough, and it's time to.
Maybe I should have charged it more.
Yeah. No, we really do appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us, Ivan. It's always a treat, and it's always a podcast we get a lot of positive feedback from. So we do appreciate you coming and taking time out to speak to us.
Well, it's great to see you all, and anytime.
Thank you. That's all from us. Thanks to Ivan and Ollie for their excellent input. Thank you for listening and supporting us. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.